عمر من المغرب. بس قبل لا ندخل الستيج حبيت أقول كلمة واحدة. طبعا عمر منظم معانا أيضا، ومعانا من الصبح من الظهر تقريبا إلى الآن. مسكين تعب معانا وبعد متحدث، فحبيت بس أشارككم هذه المعلومة لأن عمر جدا شخص مهم في عائلة FlutterMENA، وحابين نشكره احنا كمنظمين، وحابين نشكره تشكرونه ايضا كحضور، لان بدونه ما كنا نقدر وبدون التيم ما كنا نقدر نوصل الى هذا المستوى اللي احنا وصلنا اليه. فعمر بعد من الشباب الجدا مبدعين في المغرب، يعني يعمل بوت كامبس، عنده قنوات يوتيوب والكثير من الكونتنت، فإنسان جدا خبير في هذا المجال. أهلا عمر. شكرا لحضورك.
بارك الله فيك.
أهلا وسهلا. طبعا أنا أعطيك المايك وأعطيك الستيج، ممكن تبدأ السيشن مالك ونلتقي إن شاء الله بعد النهاية، وبالتوفيق إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله. شكرا. بارك الله فيك. So hello everyone. So today's session will be in English, as no everyone understands the Moroccan Arabic. So I'm Omar Defaoui. I'm a mobile team lead at Gwala and also a GDG organizer at Kenitra and Gulmim. It's 2 cities from Morocco. And in today's session, we'll talk about integration testing in Flutter. So I really hope, by the way, that you enjoyed today's sessions, the previous one, this one, and the upcoming one. And I really hope that you will learn something from it, and it can motivate you to share also with the community and to build some great things that will impact people's lives, and why not they can use it and become the next Facebook and the next Instagram. So for the agenda of today's session, of course, we will start about an overview about what is integration testing. Then we will talk about why do we need to add some integration testing to our code base. After that, we will talk about how we can set up our project so we can run integration testing. After that, we will present the syntax, then how the Flutter team did implement the integration testing. So if anyone is interested to add more feature to it, he can have some ideas about how it's implemented, so he can do the same thing to extend it and bring more features to the community. Then we will present some limitations that we have with the default integration testing provided by the Flutter team. And of course, when we talk about limitations, we need to provide the solutions. So I will share with you some alternatives that I think they are great, and we should also learn a little bit about them. So if we are in a new project, we can select which tool are suitable, so we don't lose a lot of time with the wrong tool. And then if you have a deployment CI/CD pipeline, we will talk briefly about how we can trigger the integration test directly from the CI/CD pipeline to automate the entire flow from the development till the deployment to the stores, either the App Store or the Play Store. And of course, the last point will be a Q&A session. So what is integration testing? And by the way, in some documentations and in some articles, you might find that we name it end-to-end testing or E2E testing. So it's the same thing. It's just the naming convention that changed from every author or video maker. So the integration testing, obviously, it's some tests, but with this kind of tests, we simulate real-world scenarios involving in the integration of UI elements, state management, and navigation, and why not some API calls and some dependencies that we have in our project. So if we want to have a clear idea about what is the integration testing, I will do a quick comparison with the widget test that we just seen with Mr. Islam in his session. So let's say we have an e-commerce application, and the first screen, of course, is the login screen. And in this screen, we have a login button. So we have a square shape, and inside the shape, we have a text which is login. So if we want to test only this button if he's working correctly, so we can have widget test for that button. So whenever we click on that button, we expect that we show a loading indicator instead of the login text. So this is for the widget test. But for the integration test, we want to test an entire feature, an entire module, or maybe the entire mobile application. So in the e-commerce app, we have the login flow, we have the sign-in flow, we have the ordering flow, the cart flow, the checkout screen, and also the history screen. So of course, we need to make sure that all the features are working, even if we do some changes. So what I just said has to do with why do we need to add integration test in our code. So with the example of the e-commerce application. So of course we will need a date picker when so the user can select the date where he wants to pick up his order. So let's say we built the mobile app the first time, we deploy it, we share it with users, and everyone is happy. But we will not just drop that code and we will move on to our next project. Of course, we will need to provide support. We will need to provide more features to the users so everyone can be happy. So when we talk about adding new features, so there is a risk of breaking the old features that we already have. So if we don't have any tests in our code, either the unit, widgets, or the integration testing, let's say in this date picker, we should not allow the user to select a date before today's date. So today is the 26th. We cannot allow a user to order something on the 21. So it's impossible. So of course, in the first release, we already supported this feature, but our Scrum Master or the project manager decided to add date picker also in the register screen. So the user, before creating an account, he should enter his birth date. So as a developer, we might forget about that. This date picker, it's the same one that we are using in the ordering screen. So we might go and remove the first date option that we have, and then the users will have the option in the ordering screen to select a very an earlier date than today, and this is problematic. So if we don't have the integration test, maybe we will not come to this edge case, and we will push the application to production. And if somebody finds this issue, he can start ordering some food in for the previous day just to break up our system. And it's problematic, as you know, of course, when we find an issue, we should correct the issue, test it, then send this to review from Apple and from Google, which might take from several hours to several days, depending on the size of the project and the features that we have in this project. So this is why we should have some integration tests that test all the flow, and not just the correct flow where everything is working fine. We should also add some tests for the edge cases that should not be allowed. So for example, for the case of the date picker, we should, in our tests, include some testing with some old values, with the current date, and with featured dates. So every time we will think about pushing the app to production, we will run the test first. If everything is okay, then we can proceed and push the code to production. And it also reduces the manual testing by the QA team. As you know, the QA might be manual or automatic. And of course, the automatic testing is always save time, and maybe the QA team will forget an edge case, but the programmatic testing will not forget anything. So now that we have a basic idea about what integration test is, now we will move on to how we can set up our project to start doing some integration test. So the first thing, we will open the pubspec.yaml file that we have in our project, and we will go directly below the dev dependencies and make sure that it's dev dependencies and not dependencies. And we will add the integration test. And we specify that the SDK is Flutter, because this one is provided by the Flutter team. And of course, if you don't find the Flutter test, you should add it also. But by default, it's created when you create the project for the first time. Okay, so now that we created the package to our pubspec.yaml, we will go to the root directory of our project, and we will create a folder named integration test. So it's not under the test folder that are created by default. This one is for the unit test, but we will create a new folder in the root directory. And inside this folder, we will add the files where we will include our test. So this is the syntax that we have. It's the same one that Mr. Islam was presenting. We have the same syntax, and I will go later to the screen to when we will do a reminder about every function here that we have, so it will be easier to proceed with. So now that we have written our code, we need to run it. So there is people that prefer to use the IDE and other people that prefer to use the command line interface. So for the VS Code users, they can directly click on run or debug that is available on top of the function or on top of the widget test. And for the IntelliJ users, they will find a play button here before the main and also before the test widget function. And for people that prefer to use the command line, they can use the Flutter test command, and we specify the integration test. So this command basically will use the default device that is linked to our machine, and also it will run all the tests that we have. So let's say, for example, here we have 3 tests, so we will run the 3 of them. But if we want to specify the test that we want, we can add slash and we add the name of the file that we want to test. And of course, if we have more than one device connected to our machine, we can specify which device we want to use. And of course, if you want to get the device ID, you can use the command flutter devices, and you will get every device and his ID. So you can include it here. Now for the syntax, Mr. Islam already talked about it, but never mind, we can do a quick reminder about it. I will not take a lot of time presenting this. So in case we want to run the integration test in a real device, we should add this line of code before running our test. So basically, we should add it here between the main function and between the test widget. And then we have this pump widget. It's used to render the widget that we provide in the parameter. Let's say it's the function that will launch a specific widget, so we can start our testing from that specific widget. And please make sure that if you have any dependencies to that widget, you should load them before pumping this widget, because otherwise the widget will not find the dependencies and you will receive immediately an error. Then we have this pump function. So basically, it's rebuild the widget tree, so we can see the changes. You can see it's like calling set state, and of course we can add the optional parameter for the duration. So if we pass a duration of 1 second, it means that when we come to this line of code, we will wait 1 second, then we will call the tester.pump, and then we will continue to the next function. After that, we have pump and settle. So the difference between pump and settle and pump is that pump and settle will wait until the end of all the animations. Then we can move on to the next instruction. But for the pump, it just rebuild the widget tree and move on. But in case we have an API call, of course, we don't have an immediate action. So for example, if we click on login, we will not access the home screen immediately. We will wait until we get the response of the login API, and then we can decide either we will allow the user to continue or not. So while waiting, of course, we will have a loading indicator. So if we use the pump and settle, we will wait until there is no animations, which means there is no loading indicators. Then we can continue with the other test. But if we call the pump and we call the next instruction, we will have an issue and the application will crash. Why? Because maybe the next instruction is we try to find an element in the home screen, but the home screen is not loaded yet, so we will have immediately a crash. And another thing, you need to make sure that you don't forget the await, because otherwise the code will broke and you will lose a lot of time debugging why you have an issue and the code seems correct, but it's because of the await. And believe me, you will forget it a lot of time. Next, now that we talk about the basic functions that we will use every time we write an integration or widget test, we need, before doing anything, we need to find the widget that we will try to access. So for that, we use what we call the finders. So there is a lot of finders. For example, we search by a value inside a widget, or we can select using a key. For example, if we have a widget that are deep in the widget tree and it's very difficult to access using the ancestors and the descendants, in this case, we can give it a key and access it simply without any troubles. And also we can search by a widget. So this one is helpful in case, like, for example, we are using a visible widget, and depending on a condition, we choose to show or hide a widget. So we can add a mock of the data that we are passing to this widget, and then we call find by widget to see if we find this widget or not. And this will allow us to check if our visible widget has the correct condition or not. Of course, we have many others, but I decided to include only the basic one. We have also the search by ancestors, by type, by descendants, etc. So now that we use the finder and we found a widget, so we need to add a very strict condition. So we use the expect function where we pass our finder, and also we pass in the second parameter what we call a matcher. So a matcher basically is used to verify a given value that a given value meets our expectations. So for example, if we are trying to search by text and we want to find the button login, so we will say find that text login. But of course, we need to find only one widget that contains the text login. And of course, it depends on your use case. So you can have more than one instance of this widget. But I'm talking in general, you should only find one widget. So we should, let's say, expect that you find only one widget that contains the value login. Then if our finder, if for example, we don't expect to find this widget, we should say finds nothing, and we have finds widget. So this one is to check if we find at least one element or more elements, and finds n widget. So this one we pass a third parameter, which is the number of widgets that we should find with the finding. And the use case for this one is, for example, if we have a list view and we have a load more button. So for example, if by default we load only 10 items, so of course, when we count the values, we should find 10 items, but after clicking on load more, we should find more than 10 items. Okay, so now that we presented the finders, the matchers, and the basic syntax, you should now have a clear idea about what this code does. So this is just a test for the basic counter app that we always have when we create a new Flutter project. So the first thing we do is that we launch the My App widget. It's the root widget of our Flutter application. Then we verify that we have only one widget that has the value 0. Then we go and check for something that has a key increment. So for our case, we assign this key increment to the floating action button that we have in the bottom side of in the bottom right side of the screen, and then we click on this floating action button. So now what we should expect? We should expect that we no longer have 0 and we have 1. So this is what we have here. We should expect that there is no widget containing the value 0 and there is only one widget containing the value 1. But if we don't call the pump and settle, what will happen? This check will fail. Why? Because we didn't reload the widget tree and we still have the value 0. So we should call pump and settle, or just pump, because we will not have any animation in this case. But it doesn't, we will not lose anything if we call the pump and settle, so we can call it. and this test will succeed. So I will give you a clear example in my IDE. So this is the image that I will give you an example with. So in this image, we have an email field, password field, and the login button. Here we have continue. So basically, the first thing that we have is we need to set up the app dependencies, because this app is built with Flutter and Firebase. So we need to prepare the Firebase, and then we open our app. So once we open our app, of course, we will write if there is any animation that we have while opening the app, and after that we check if we have one instance of the scaffold. Of course, the root widget of the app is a scaffold, so we should expect that there is one. After that, we will search for the first text form field that we have here, which is the email, and we should find only one. And in this field, we will enter the text. So we will enter the email that we have registered in our Firebase. Then we will search for the password with the same way, and then we search for the continue button. So this one is just for hiding the keyboard. So I just click on this welcome back to hide the keyboard, so we can see the loading indicator here when we click on continue. Then when we find the login button, we will tap on it, and we will say pump and settle, and then we will check if we are in the login screen or not. So the problem that you might see here or not, that is that we have a lot of pump and settle. Our code is not reusable. So for now, we have only the correct credentials flow. And what if we want to add another flow? Let's add another one here. Let me select this one. Okay. And this time is incorrect credentials. So we need to do the same thing, except we need to change something. For example, we will provide a wrong password. So in this case, we kept everything. We changed only the password, and we will only change the check for the failure. So here we will have a failure. Okay. And we will add the code for it here. So of course, we need to find a better way to do it, because we need to check with an incorrect password, then we need to check with an incorrect email, then we need to check with an incorrect email and password, and so on, if we have a lot of checks to do. And if every time we call the same code, we will have a very big code, and if we just change something in the UI, we need to change everywhere, and it's not a good thing for the maintenance and for the readability. And also, you should be a Flutter developer to write something like this, because in some teams we have QA, which will work on adding the test for you, and you will not be doing the test by yourself. So what is the solution for this? Of course, there is a lot of solutions, and what I'm suggesting is the robot pattern. So we will keep everything as it is. We will not change anything, but we will just change our way of writing the integration test. So what we want to do is to perform the same actions as a normal user would. So the normal user will not say, I need to find the email field, I need to write the value, I need to click something somewhere, I need to do the pump and settle. So the normal user will see the email, will type the email, type the password, click on continue. It's direct actions. So this is exactly what we should do. So to set up the project directory, inside the integration test, we will create another folder, which is robots. Of course, you can name it whatever you want. It's just naming. You can use the naming that best makes sense to you. And under this directory, we will create our robot. So basically, in the code of the robot, what we will have? We will have all the boiled point code that we should not have in the main test, and which will make the reusability of the code much, much easier. So for example, if we need to use the enter email function, where we find the email, we expect that we have only one widget, and we enter the value. I'm sure we will use this one a lot of time. So we just include it in the robot. The same thing goes for the entering the password. The same thing goes for hiding keyboard and clicking on the continue button. And when we go to the test, we will just call these functions directly. We create an instance of the login robot. We pass the tester, of course, because this is the instance that are responsible of interacting with our UI. And then we just call these functions directly. We say click on login button, enter email, enter password, and click on proceed. And if for some reasons we want to check what will happen if we don't enter a password, so we just delete this line. We say click on login button, enter email, click on proceed, and then we will have an issue. And like this, we can do a very complex scenarios using the same code and having a code like this make it much readable and easier to maintain. And also we can bring someone from the QA team. We just say, hey, you can check the functions that we have inside this login robot, and he can create all the flows that he have in the file he's using to write all the edge cases that we might have for his project. So this is it for how we can write our integration testing. Of course, I will show you this another time in the IDE. I will just remove what I added here. Okay. Okay, so this is the login without the robot test, and this is the login with the robot test. So now we just say set up the project, enter email, enter password, hide keyboard, and click on the login button. So it's much easier to read and also to maintain. And it's only a very basic use case. We are just entering email and password. So you can think about a big project, for example, a banking project or a booking project where you have a lot of use cases and edge cases that you need to think of and to include in your test. The same goes for the login robot. It's the same one I showed you in the screenshot. Now we will do the test for another feature, which is adding an item to the cart. So here I decided to start from the login flow, then to the cart screen. So we will do the login flow, the entire flow. Then we will click on the first product that we have. We will check that we have the quantity is 0. We will increment the quantity, and we check that we have the value 1. Then we will increment it again, and we will check that the value is 2. Then we will decrement the quantity, and we should expect that the value is 1. Then we add this item to the cart. After that, we open the cart screen, and we check if the item that we added is available out there and if the quantity is equal to 1. So of course, I use a robot for that. So we have the setup, we have all the code to click on the first product, to increment product, to decrement product. And of course, you can use ChatGPT or Gemini to help you write these functions, and you can be ready to start. So I will run this test so you can see how it looks like. We just wait a few seconds. I will add this to the search so we don't see some other things. So I will not touch anything, and you will see the entire flow. Okay, so our test has passed, and also we can see the details in the test results. As you can see, this is the test that I ran right now, and it's working fine. And if it was very quick and you didn't see very well how the things was running, so I have here a recording. So the first thing that we did is that we entered the email, then the password. We clicked on welcome back to hide the keyboard, and then we clicked on the continue button. And because we have a loading indicator, we didn't go to the next option, to the next instruction, I mean. but we white ink, we don't have any login indication, then we go to the next screen. So this is our home screen. Next, we clicked on the first item that we have in our list. So here is the indicator. We clicked on the first item that we have, and then we check that the value that we have is 0. Then we incremented this value by 1. Then we checked if the value is 1. We increment it again. We check if the value is 2. Then we decrement the value and we check if the value is 1. And then we clicked on Add to Cart. And here we check if we have the correct item with the correct quantity. And if everything is okay, so the app closed and everything is as expected. So this is just a normal use case. Of course, you can add to this group. I think I have a group in the login. Yeah, you can add multiple tests inside the group, so you can keep track of it in your test results. So here you will have each group and the items under this group. So it's just some way of organization to help you stay organized and keep everything related to each other in one place. Okay, so I think I will continue the presentation. Okay. Okay, so now that we are talking about the integration testing, how the Flutter team did this work. So basically, it's just bridges the Dart test into the native test. So when we run the command of Flutter test, we generate a JUnit XML file for the Android and an XC result file for the iOS. So the question here is, why do we need to generate a native test file for Android and iOS, and we don't use the Flutter capabilities, and we generate directly some extensions that are only used by Flutter? So the answer here is the next point that we have here is because of the native tooling that we have and because of the device farms. So what I mean by device farms, so as you saw in the previous example, to run integration test, we cannot run it only inside the terminal. So we should have either a physical device, either a emulator or a simulator to run our test. So of course, if we want to have a CI/CD pipeline, we cannot attach a phone to it, and every time we need to run our pipeline, and when we arrive at the test, we need to run it in our machine, and then we say to the pipeline, you can now carry on and continue your work. Of course not. We should. A lot of companies have a lot of devices, maybe simulators or real device. It depends on the company. So, for example, we have Firebase Test Lab and AWS Device Farm, and we have a lot of solutions do that. And these tools need to support Flutter if he doesn't generate native code. So if we have here something else than this JUnit or XC result, for example, we have that Flutter test. So the Firebase team needs to go to understand how the Flutter team implemented that feature, so they can support that in their devices. The same thing goes for Amazon, and the same thing goes for all the service providers. And this is something that needs a lot of time, a lot of work, and some companies might decide not to support Flutter by default. So when we generate native solutions, we are sure that all these platforms will be working and will support Flutter out of the box without any changes. And this is the power of generating some native files from our Flutter code that we wrote. And the same thing goes for the reporting platform that will give us some report regarding our test results. Okay, so now that we talked about the integration tests, the default one that are provided by the Flutter team, it's important to talk about the limitations that we have. So the first thing that I want to highlight is that we have slow builds. So what I mean by that, for example, if we have 3 files, we have the test for the login, the test for the registration, and the test for the ordering flow. So what happens when we launch the command Flutter test integration test? So basically, we will build an APK file for the first test, and then we will run this test. And if everything is okay, we will close the app and we will build a new APK file just for the second file. And after that, we will run it. If everything is okay, we will move on and close the app. We will build a new APK for the third file. We will test it. And if everything is okay, we will close the app and we will get the results that everything is okay. So this is time consuming. And you can think if you have like 10 files here and you have to write for building an APK 10 times, you can expect how much time you need to write before seeing the results of the testing. Then we don't have isolations between the tests. So for example, if we have multiple test files, if the first one succeed, it's great. We move on to the next file. But if the next file failed, we will not go to the next test. We will stop there and we will say, hey, you have an issue in this file, go and fix it. And you will not see the results of these files. Next, we cannot interact with the permission request, because when we use the tester class that we have, we only interact with the widgets that we have in our widget tree. But for the permission request, it's something native that are coming from the system, so we cannot access this allow button or this don't allow button. So a quick solution for that is that when we try to launch the Flutter test, we add some additional parameters that you can find on the internet, so we can accept by default the permissions, and we don't get this request when we open the application. And it doesn't work every time, but it's just a workaround if you want to accept some permissions while you try to build the APK file. Then the same thing goes for the web views. It's not under our widget tree. We cannot access the elements inside the web view. So for example, we can't click on Flutter or click on these 3 lines or anywhere. We can't do anything here. The same thing goes for the platform authentication. For example, sign in with Apple, with Google, with Facebook. Of course, when we click on one of them, we will have a pop-up with some additional actions that we need to provide. So for example, for Google, we need to click on yes, I accept to share my email, my name, and the other information. And we cannot access that specific pop-up because it's a native pop-up, and we cannot do anything for it. So this is why we have some alternative solutions built by the community. So I will present here 4. You can find more options out there in the internet, but I chose these 4. We have Patrol, Appium, Flatium, and Honey. Every solution of them have his own advantages and disadvantages, and we will learn a little bit about every one of them, so we can have more information about these platforms, and why not we can choose them to do our integration testing instead of using the default one. If we have a lot of permissions in our mobile app, if we need to access some native tooling that the integration testing are not capable of handling. So I will start with the Flatium. So I have here some the way of installing and doing the configuration of the packages, but you can find more details in the official website of every one of them, and I included the link of all of them. So for Flatium, we just install the Flatium CLI, and then we call Flatium init, and it will generate a Flatium.yaml file where we have the configuration for the Flatium. And what interests us is the flows that we will start writing. So we say Flatium new flow, and we add here the name of the flow. So for example, we say scroll list flow. And the code that we will write here is like the ausp.yaml file. It's the same. It's with the same structure. So for the keywords, you can find them in the official website if you want to have an idea about all the keywords that they support. So you can have an idea about the limitations that they might have. So if we try to understand what we have in this code, so basically we will press on start. So what does it mean? It means that under the hood, they will use a finder to find the widget that contains the value start, and when he will find it, he will click on it. Then we have the scroll instruction. So basically, we will provide the list view and then the item where we should stop scrolling, the direction, the timeout, and also the speed. Then we have expect visible. So it's like doing find by text. And if we find the card 12, we say we should have at least one element of this text to say that we expect visible. Then we have write text. So inside this card, we have a text field. So we will write hello inside it, and we will wait for 15 seconds. Maybe we wait for an API response or something, and then we can continue our instructions. So this is how the Flutter team architecture their solution. You can find out more about the syntax and the limitations on the internet and also on their official website. Next, we have Honey. It's also, they have a unique extension. So to install it, the first thing is that we need to add it as a dependency to our project. Then we will install Honey extension for VS Code. Then we need to do some configuration in the launch.json file that are used by the VS Code. You will find the details about the configuration here in their official website. It's very clear. They say copy this and paste it there, and that's it. And then we add this instruction to the main file of our project. So our project can use the dependency and can link it with our code. And for the directory structure, the same thing as the integration test, we should create a folder named Honey in the root directory of our project. And under this folder, we can add all the Honey files that we have. And for the syntax, it's human friendly. And even if your QA team is not a Flutter developer, or either if you are doing the test by yourself, you can use it. You will not have to add any Flutter code. To be honest, I don't know why, if you are a Flutter developer, you will not use the Flutter syntax and you will rather learn a new syntax. But it's your choice. So we will try to understand what we have in this file. So the first thing that we have is that we verify that the value 0 is visible. So we use here finder to find a widget which his value is 0, and we expect that we have this value visible in the screen. Then we tap on the increment button. So we search for a button, and we should have the value increment in this button, and we will click on it. Then we will verify that the value 1 is visible. So you can think of this one is like the counter up, except that instead of the floating action button, we have a button here with the value increment. So if we click on the increment another time, so this time we expect to have the value 2 and not the value 3, because we increment it only once. And then we have here another button with the value second, and when we click on it, maybe a text will be visible and with the value second, and also text with the value hello world will also be visible. And we can continue our test with the instructions depending on the use case we have, and depending on the screen we are working on, and the different widgets and the widget tree that we have. We can add the corresponding values or instructions. And next, we have Patrol. I think it's the most advanced one, and it's the one that I prefer working with. So the installation is as usual. We will add the Patrol as a dependency. Then we will install the Patrol CLI, and then we will add some configuration code to the native code. So this one you will find in their official documentation how you can proceed. It's just some code that you need to copy from their website and copy it in your code base in the Gradle file for Android and in the info.paste for the iOS. and then we create the integration test directory like the default one, and then if we want to run the test, we write the command patrol test, and then we provide the file that we want to test. So for the syntax of the patrol, it's similar to Flutter. And why? It's because they are extending the Flutter implementation and they are not replacing it. So we can still use all the finders that we know. We can still access all the matchers and all the syntax that we know. And on top of that, they have added a lot of features that makes the testing even more easier. So for example, instead of having the PAMP widget, they added a new one, which is PAMP widget and settle, to avoid adding an additional line where we say PAMP and settle. Then we have access to the native tooling, so we can enable Wi-Fi, we can enable the 4G, we can toggle the dark mode, we can interact with the locations, so with the permissions. So this one is asking to access the location. And also we can access the native notification. So for example, we can trigger to send a notification, and then we verify that we received the notification with the exact value that we want. And also they added the syntax. It's like the syntax of jQuery. So we use this $sign with the parentheses and the value inside it. So this one, it means that we will check for a widget that contains the value request camera permission, and we will click on it. So it's very simple. And when we get the pop-up to accept the camera permission, we can just say native.grant permission when in use. Because as you know, when we request for a camera, we have three options. The first one is to accept only when the app is in use, or only this time, or never allow this permission. The same thing goes for the other instructions. So here is more examples about the patrol syntax. So this one is for the this one is showcasing this. I don't know the name of this in English. Let's say this sign. So whenever we are trying to find something with a key, we just say this sign and we key, and we can do whatever we want. If we want to enter a text, to tap on it, or to write for something else. And then here is some examples. What is the patrol syntax and what is the syntax using the by default integration testing? So this is the example for the list view. This one for finding with the subscribe. I think I still have only 2 minutes. Okay. And this one is making the developer life easier, because no one like using the descendants and the ancestors, as sometimes this tree goes very deep and it will be a mess, and when we want to do some maintenance, it will be very difficult. So with this syntax, it's much more easier. We say find a list view, inside of it there's a subscribe test. When you find it, click on it, and that's it. And this is how we can access the widget tester that I was using before in the example in my IDE, and we can use all the by default options. So this is a video regarding the patrol. We have a nice feature which is the hot restart. So using the default implementation, we don't have this feature. We don't have the hot restart. So whenever we want to do an update to our code, we need to rebuild the APK and to see the changes. But with patrol, we have the option to do the hot restart. So here they added some code, and they will just type error, and the app will be refreshed. Here is it, hot restart. So this is a very nice feature to have, and big up to the patrol team. And now it's the last part, how we can integrate this into our CI/CD pipeline. It depends on every developer. They use a different service. Maybe they are not using any service and they are consuming directly Apple API and also Google API. But maybe you are using CodeMagic or Fastlane. They are both great tools for CI/CD pipelines. So the process is like this. The first thing we do is that we set up our project. So what I mean by set up our project is that we add the relevant dependencies. Like, for example, if we want to use patrol, we need to add the dependencies and add the configuration. Then we write our tests that we want, and after writing all the tests that we need to prepare running tests from an APK. So what I mean by this, for example, for patrol and the default integration test, we need to add some configuration to Gradle file if we want to run the tests in Android. So this is what I mean by this configuration. Then we need to set up our device far. So in case we are using Firebase Test Lab, we need to request a service access account from your Google Cloud console. You can request a service account key, and we add that service account key to our secrets. For example, if you are using GitHub Actions, you can store the value of the Google service account key inside the secrets option, and then we write the scripts that will every time we will run our pipeline. What he will do, he will upload our generated file to the Firebase Test Lab. He will wait for the run, and then he will get the results. And if everything is okay, he will continue running the pipeline. So this is the idea behind adding the testing to our pipeline. I didn't provide any code due to the lack of time, but we can have another session where we can add some deployment pipeline to our project, so we can upload our app to both the test flights and also Google Play internal service. So that's it for my presentation. I hope it was clear and you learned something from it. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I will take a look to the comments.
Thank you very much, Omar. It was an enlightenment session. Let's see if there will be any comments. In general, all the comments were supportive.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Ahmed was saying very informative. You're doing a great job. Hello from Tunisia. Thank you, Ahlam. Great session. Thank you, Omar. Amazing session. So I just want to re-mention that Omar was with us from the starting of the event in the backstage, working on making this event a successful event. So another thanks. We cannot say enough thank you for all your hard work, especially that you have a session with us.
Yeah, you're the most.
Can I ask you a question before we start answering the users or questions? So from your experience, so I know that you are building bootcamps and creating bootcamps on your YouTube channel. And from your experience, what is the most difficult thing that a new joiner in Flutter would face? And how would you advise him to overcome this new challenge?
You mean for a new Flutter developer or
a new Flutter developer, like just a new Flutter developer, and what kind of challenges they face usually, especially during your bootcamps, and what would be the, let's say, a general advice that you will let everyone know about?
Yeah, okay, it's clear. So I think the most challenging part that I found is during the session of the new safety, because it's a new topic, because everyone that joins some sessions like mobile development, web development, they already see somewhere programming language, maybe Python or Java or something else. So when you start talking about new safety, we add the question mark here. We add two question mark here. So it's a mind blowing, and for the first time, it might be difficult. But I always say that when we try to learn something, we need to try it ourselves. So even if I see a video about it, so they say here is where we use one question mark. Here is where we use two question marks. But if we don't try it ourselves, we will never have the clear idea about how it works clearly. And always we should start from the basics. We should not, for example, if somebody want to start Flutter from scratch, so we don't have any basics. So I don't recommend to just come and start directly with widgets. And the first thing you build is a to-do app where you watch a YouTube video and you start doing a to-do app. The first thing is you start with the basics. You start with the programming language. We are using Dart, so we should know the syntax of Dart. What is the features that we have? What is the why we are using Dart? What is the point in common between Dart and Java, for example? And like these questions. So, for example, if somebody will say, okay, I was a native Android developer. I was using, for example, Java before the release of the Kotlin. And when he will move to the Dart, if he say, okay, I'm already aware of Java, I will not learn Dart. I will start directly with Flutter. So basically, we don't have the new safety in Java. So he will not know that there is this thing in Dart, and he will start writing code. And every time he see a question mark, he will think that this is only for Flutter. So we will have a very hard time debugging the issues. So this is why we should always start from with the basics, and we should everything we see or we hear about or we see it in a tutorial, we should try it ourselves, and then if we have questions, we can go and search deeply in the internet, or we can have a chat with ChatGPT or Gemini and make an audio and and share the idea with us. Yeah, that's it.
Of course. So very insightful. Exactly. So we try ourselves. We build stuff. We do step by step. It's an amazing advice. So we have a couple of questions. The first one is, what was the hardest scenario from Kasangur? What was the hardest scenario you needed to cover with the integration testing?
Okay, so we have a mobile app where we have payments, but this payment goes through another app, and it's the other app that needs to validate that payment so we can get a response. And I need to check that I received a notification and also I received a pop-up. And also before this operation, we need to accept the camera permission. So all these features was included in only one flow. So I needed to implement the API of the other mobile app in my testing. So instead of using another device, I called the API used in the other mobile app, and the other mobile app needed the login. So I added also the code for the login in the app, so we can get the access token. And yeah, I think it was the hardest one. And also to access the notification. This is how I discovered Patrol. Because I was using
interesting
integration testing.
Interesting story. So and the way that you handled it is very interesting. How you figured out step by step. We always say if it's a big problem, you just divide it and try to fix one thing after another. We have another question from Muhammad. Is saying, when is the advanced session?
I think he's asking for the next session from this one. Yeah, I think we can schedule this and we can share it on social media. But for the advanced date, we can't provide it, of course, right now.
So our attendees are demanding for an advanced session, so no pressure, Omar.
Yeah.
Whenever you're free.
We can provide it also.
Okay, so I think this is it. Thank you very much, Omar. I know I will see you back again in the backstage, but I still have to say thank you in front of everyone. Any closing remarks you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for this initiative. It's very important and it's very interesting, where we have a lot of Flutter enthusiasts. We get to know new people, we learn new topics, and this is how we can improve. by learning every day something new, and this is how we can improve in our career. Yeah, thank you everyone
very much, Omar.
for your encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Omar. Thank you all the organizing team in the backstage. I will say their names. I'm trying to tweet their names more and more. Hadi, Nawal, Farah, and of course Mahmoud. The whole team was doing an amazing job. We have also Nasser, and also one of the next speakers, Yasin, who we started the idea together, I think, and we discussed. So thank you very much, Omar, and we will welcome Yasin to the